So this is our agenda. Thrilled to welcome people. I am the moderator, and now I am the co-director. Oh, I'm the founder in residence of Funding the Next Generation, co-director till the end of the month. And I really want to introduce you to Christina Gilbert. And if you say something, your face will pop up for people. So
Yeah. Hi, everybody. For those of you I haven't met yet, it's very nice to meet you. I'm excited to be here and excited really to connect with everybody today and hear more about Sonoma and Pomona.
and Santa Cruz um
And Santa Cruz and Dave and Nicole and all the things.
nothing. So if anybody didn't get it, Christina is the new director of Funding the Next Generation. So we're here to talk about the implications of the election for children's issues, specifically for measures for the ballot. And we'll hear from Sonoma, Pomona, and Santa Cruz. Then Nicole and I will share what lessons we got out of this. And I am thinking, unless Dave is here now, that we should
Dave
just
is here.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And Dave, you share your screen and we will, can you do that? Hello?
I think I can. Give me just a second here.
Oh, wait a minute. Did somebody make him a co-host?
No, Margaret, I couldn't do it. You'll have to.
I just made him a co-host. We're on a tight time frame here, so.
I understand. Don't worry. I'm have this up in just a second.
And
Uh,
if people will sign in, um, and with who they are and where they're from. Any generic question you might have at this point, that would be great, so we all know who's here. Um, it, okay, so I am going to call on Dave Metz first. Dave is a pollster, a political strategist. He has been the pollster for all our children's measures and children's issues. He's an expert in a lot of things, but the most important thing he's an expert in polling on is kids' issues. So I asked him to sort of say what happened in the election generally and what are the implications for kids. And now we have 8 minutes, Dave.
all right, fantastic. So everything you needed to know about the election in 8 minutes. So I'll go through this fairly quickly, and then we may have a little time for Q&A at some point. I think there is a mix of good and bad news in California for coming out of the election, but when it comes to investments in kids, I think there is more good than bad. And as depressing as the overall environment is for many of us, I think there are some silver linings there, which I'll walk through. First, just a little bit about the mood of the electorate overall. It is lousy in California, and it has been lousy for most of the last 4 or 5 years since the pandemic. A majority of Californians tell us they think things are on the wrong track. Only about a third think they're headed in the right direction. If you look on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see that this is always a partisan metric when you ask people this question. If your party is in charge of state government, you tend to feel like things are headed in the right direction. But even among Democrats who completely dominate government in California, only half think the state is headed in the right direction right now. So there's a lot of angst out there about the way things are going that cuts across partisan lines. In a poll that we conducted after the election, we asked people to sum up how things are going in California in 2 or 3 words. And this slide gives you sort of a summary of the things that they most often volunteered. The single word that they said more than any other described California was expensive. And that core concern about the cost of living, while it is challenging for us when we're trying to get people to raise their taxes, because many of the things that are involved with being a parent and raising a kid are also more expensive, it means more people need help and understand how others do. And I think that's it's sort of a double-edged sword for us. It creates a strong sense of need, but also limits people's willingness to open up their own wallets. And that's reflected in what people tell us when we ask them to describe their own financial situation in California. We had people put themselves into one of the 4 categories you see listed here. And while a majority of California voters report that they are living comfortably, you'll note that fewer than 1 in 5 say that right now they are able to increase the amount of money they are saving. And keep in mind, we're talking to voters here, which means that it is a segment of the population that is older, more affluent, more likely to be homeowners. They're in more stable financial situation than adult Californians more broadly. So when we see almost half of voters saying they're just getting by financially or really struggling, I think that's an indication of the severity of the challenges that people are facing. And this has impacts that are not just don't just affect how people think about themselves today, but affects how they think about future generations. And this is another one of those things that's a little bit of a double-edged sword for us. When we ask people how confident they are that their children and grandchildren will be able to afford to live in the same California community they do today, just 1 in 5 tell us that they think they will be able to. When we ask if they think their children and grandchildren will be financially better off than they themselves are today, only a quarter are confident that they will be. It's hard to overstate how much this is a huge break with the way polling in America has traditionally looked. The American dream, and to a large extent the California dream, has been that this is a place of opportunity, that if you can get a foothold here, you're going to be able to put your descendants in a position where they're going to be able to thrive and prosper. And today, most people think their kids will be less well off than they are. Again, that creates a sense of economic anxiety. And you'll note, by the way, at the bottom of the slide that this holds true regardless of how much money you're making. Even the most affluent households feel the same way. So it creates some economic anxiety, but it also puts people in a position where they can say, kids have it tough these days. We need to do everything we can to get them started in life in the best position they can possibly be. One more slide about the overall mood, and I promise I'll get less depressing shortly here. This is a question we've asked in a number of post-election surveys. This is data sort of looking at it every 6 years, dating back to 2012. We asked people to pick 2 or 3 emotions on this list that describe how they feel right now about how things are going in California. The biggest change we've seen is a big drop in the proportion who say that they are hopeful. And that went from 50% in 2018, which granted was an election where the Democrats had a big comeback and it was pre-pandemic, but only 28% describe themselves as hopeful today, while we still have a large shares that consider themselves concerned or frustrated. What all of this anxiety means is that when we ask voters how they feel about government, their reaction is kind of meh. Despite this being a Democratic state, views of the governor are about evenly split, the state legislature the same, and more we're seeing views of local government, which traditionally voters had more confidence in than state government, are also divided. Asking people about their county board of supervisors, a third view it favorably, a third unfavorably, and the rest don't have an opinion. This is not a new challenge that we face at the local level, but again, when we want to get more money to invest in kids, you got to have confidence that the government agency that's collecting it and distributing it is going to do a good job. And today, feelings about local government are more mixed. So, even in this lousy environment, though, what are the outcomes for measures that are sort of aligned with our goals here of making investments for the future? Well, one of the most encouraging things I think we saw was the support for the 2 bond measures that were on the ballot statewide. Prop 2, a statewide school bond, $10 billion, and Prop 4, a statewide climate bond, also $10 billion. Not only did they pass, but they got support from 3 out of 5 voters, which is as high or higher than most such bonds have fared in past elections. This despite the fact that Prop 1 for mental health only narrowly passed in the primary election, which left a lot of people panicked and thinking Californians aren't willing to support tax measures or finance measures anymore. But they were. And if you go down the list, there's other measures like Prop 35 that also involved maintaining an existing tax in order to invest in healthcare, and it fared really well. I think there has been some overinterpretation of some of the results that might be seen as endorsements of conservative positions by Californians, like the passage of Prop 36 on public safety, the defeat of the minimum wage measure, and the defeat of Prop 6. But in the case of those latter 2, virtually no money was spent on the campaigns, and they both lost narrowly. So I think there's actually a lot to be encouraged about in the statewide results. And at the local level, 72% of local tax and bond measures were approved, which is the same rate of passage, roughly, that we have seen over the course of the last decade. So that's very encouraging. And especially when you look at measures that only required a simple majority threshold, the rate of approval was even higher. This comes despite the fact that people are grouchy about the initiative process. We see that in our current polling, the way we have in past polling, by a 62 to 29 margin. They're saying they don't think the system works well, that ballot measures are confusing, that they benefit special interests. The only thing worse than making policy decisions by the initiative process in voters' minds is trusting those people in government to actually make decisions about taxes and spending. So if you're in a bad mood, it may affect your views of ballot measures, but it also affects your views of government. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and just close with a couple of comments, and I don't want to steal Angie's thunder here to talk about the campaign in Sonoma, but I just want to highlight a few message findings that we had in the polling there that I think may be relevant statewide. First, when we ask people in Sonoma County about some of their concerns before the election, you'll see a bunch of stuff at the top of the list that were concerns in Sonoma County that are concerns statewide: homelessness, cost of housing, cost of living. But look at the number 4 item on this slide: parents having to balance work and childcare responsibilities. 3 in 5 Sonoma County voters told us that was a very serious problem. More than said the same for things like street and road conditions, low wages, waste and inefficiency in county government. And again, this reflects the fact that with the cost of living as high as it is, the burden that falls on parents and families is even greater. And voters get that. And that's something that's a strength for us. In that context, we saw a range of really potent messages in Sonoma County that could make the case for their measure. And again, Angie can talk more about how they deployed them and what they used. But the numbers you see here, the proportion that rated these messages, very convincing. I'll just highlight the thing that I think is really interesting here is there's a number of messages which are traditional standbys that have always worked well for investments in kids. Strengthening K through 12 education, brain development in the early years. But then we had a couple that speak to our current situation. Post-pandemic sort of losses in the childcare sector, the fact that essential workers in particular need support at this time, and then messages involving some of the inequities in the current system where the costs are so high that there's families that are just utterly priced out of early childhood education and childcare, low wages for educators, a range of stuff that I think are both sort of true and tested effective messages, but also some emerging ones that are all standing on roughly equal footing. And there really were an abundance of very strong messages beyond even the ones that I just highlighted in Sonoma County. And I think hopefully we're going to continue to see that other places as well. And it shows us that even at a time when voters are grouchy and concerned about costs, there's a lot we can build on here and a lot that we can be successful with. Okay, I don't know if that was 8 minutes, Margaret, but I will
No,
stop there.
it was 10, but wow. Okay, now you stop sharing. And okay, Angie, do you want to share? Or you just want to talk?
I'm gonna share.
All right.
Here we go. Thank you so much, Margaret, and thanks, Dave, for that cue up on a little bit of our polling. That actually gave me a couple additional talking points. So Measure I in Sonoma County passed. We are just beyond thrilled, and like so many folks from all different walks have said things like, "Oh, this was the bright spot in the election for our county," and it does feel like people had a sense of they might have been grumpy about a lot of other things on the ballot, but there was a lot of clarity that this was the right thing to do for Sonoma County voters, and it passed at 62.8%. I think maybe there's a few more ballots left to count this week, but they have to certify, I believe, by tomorrow. So that's where we're at. Pretty decent turnout. And I think that 62.8 is above what Dave's team polled just a few months ago. So, fantastic news. We couldn't be more pleased with the electorate and just the show of support for children. It's a 0.25% countywide sales tax. And estimated, actually, someone updated me the other day that it's actually estimated to generate 32 million annually. There are a couple of 0.25% taxes already, and so we've been watching those, and the most recent numbers are about 32 million. No sunset, and we did that because we polled a few times on whether voters thought that was important. And in fact, they did not want it to sunset unless it were to be brought back as an additional measure. First Five Sonoma County is named in the ballot language as the administrator. So these funds will be deposited in the county treasury, and then like our Prop $10 that are also deposited there, the Board of Supervisors will allocate them to First Five. This was a voter-led initiative, so that's how we were able to get this across the line at a simple majority. We have been discussing this and planning it and trying for a little over 10 years, and just, pulled many times, never saw it really get up close enough to 66.6 that anybody felt confident. So as soon as that became a precedent and we could go forward with the simple majority, that's what we did. We did the signature gathering route, and we had to gather, I think our threshold was 23,000 and we turned in almost 30 to qualify. And our total budget, we actually met the fundraising goal for our kind of high budget, $620,000. We raised all of that. And actually we have a little bit of money left. And that's for both the qualification and the campaign phase. So the signature piece and the campaign. These are the expenditures. So 60% of it is all around expanding access to early care and education, childcare, workforce, increasing wages, supporting workforce development efforts, and also facilities. And then the other 40% is around children's health and mental health, including, and we called out, perinatal mental health screening and treatment. So there's a big gap in our county with those resources. And then really focused on 0 to 2, that very early relational health through things like home visiting, and then strengthening overall pediatric screening, referral systems. It does call out technology solutions for referral. And then overall prioritizing, but not exclusively, low and middle income families and children impacted by homelessness and other traumas. And if you notice that slide that Dave showed about kind of things that voters are concerned about, homelessness has been number one for years. And so we made sure to capitalize on that and prioritized, even though there's not a lot of families impacted by being unhoused in our county, voters are very concerned about children impacted by homelessness. So we included that in the language. Here's some of the factors that I feel like were really key. I mean, there's a lot of them. Just the issue of childcare for so many reasons, right? You can make the economic argument, you can make the brain science argument. There are many compelling reasons to a broad demographic of people why this was an important thing to pass in our community. And also the pandemic really helped us, right? The media covered childcare every single day, whether that was local, state, or national media, and people were quite aware that our childcare sector is in a state of crisis. Our campaign was steered by a really committed group of cross-sector leaders. So we had, local philanthropists, we had elected leaders, we had the chair or the VP of economic development at our chamber, our largest chamber of commerce, chaired the campaign steering committee. And then we also had early childhood folks. So our resource and referral folks were at the table, First Five, obviously. So really broad kind of group of folks, and then just that sense of like being committed for the long haul. That was also the case amongst this group of folks. Our endorsements were just broad, deep, every single elected official, local and state and federal in our county, including school boards, all of our cities and town mayors. Everybody endorsed this, as well as a lot of businesses, a lot of community-based organizations. And we did that really early, the endorsement, so we could just show folks how broad the support of this measure was. We really did very well with fundraising. There wasn't really a moment, except maybe in the middle of signature gathering, where we had deep concerns about not being able to raise enough money. We really were very fortunate to have early and ongoing support from Heising Simons Foundation, their Action Fund, our local community foundation came to the table, Labor, our largest tribe supported, I think at $50,000, Kaiser and also Sutter, as well as a lot of local donors. And there is a lot of wealth in Sonoma County. And our treasurer, who is also a philanthropic gentleman himself, did a whisper campaign and got every person with wealth that he knew gave us something. So we were able to meet that fundraising goal. We had no organized opposition. Nobody even filed the argument against for the voter pamphlet. Like, it was just blank, unprecedented for a sales tax. So that's probably the biggest thing that was our key factor. And then just again, like the right time, right time, right place. We had fires before the pandemic that impacted our childcare system. So there was already awareness of that. And then the pandemic just, really almost destroyed our childcare system. So people were aware of it, and it was the right time to appeal around this. Our biggest lessons learned, I could talk for so long about this, but I think some of the biggest pieces for me in my role was to make sure we always had really strong legal advice. We have like the best public law attorney in the state from my perspective, and his advice was absolutely instrumental at numerous points, especially because First Five is a public agency. And so there are a lot of things that we could do early in the campaign, but a lot of things that we had to really step back and be in the background. And he was very helpful for, ensuring that that was very clear from all angles, that all the visibility around my involvement or my staff's involvement was clear, that we stepped back once things got on the ballot. Our ballot language really focused more on outcomes, what we want to see for kids and families, not so much on strategies. We would say things like, investments that support kindergarten readiness, such as, and then list some things, but not exclude anything. Very little is excluded. It's super aligned with Prop 10, which is amazing. So we can just fold this right into our existing planning process. We have all the infrastructure already built. And then we tested both the ballot language as well as all of our arguments for communications through polling multiple times, so that we really understood what voters cared about and how to talk about that. Can't emphasize enough how important it is to cultivate that in that core team that's going to go the distance. You have to have folks that trust each other, especially as things get kind of heated politically, and be prepared to kind of hand off the baton at different times. We failed our first go round. We had some fraudulent signatures turned in, so we failed to qualify. It was devastating, but we picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves off, and that had a lot to do with having a team that was committed for the long haul. We understood that this was going to be a marathon and that it might fail. And thank you, Margaret, for always reminding us that, you might fail, and that's part of the process, and you got to get back up and try again. And then really advise everybody thoroughly vet your consultants, vet your signature gathering firms, because we got really screwed on that, lost a lot of money and time. Very important to have good strategy consultants that understand kind of early childhood issues, but that are also just extremely politically savvy. And then the last thing I'll say is that just what I've learned, I think most from this, is that the whole electoral politics space is so different than what folks like myself do in the sort of social services, children's services, healthcare, education field. Is a way different mindset. You're going to use different language. You're going to have different priorities. The politics are weird and feel icky sometimes. It just doesn't align with where we're coming from, and you have to be able to sit with that discomfort. It's a whole different world, and you got to focus on winning. Like, that's got to be the end of the day, what you care about. All right, how did I do with time?
That was great. And I would just want to say one more thing. I think
Sure.
we first went to Sonoma County to talk about doing a measure 11 years ago. So it took a long time to sort of build up the interest in the constituency and the capacity. So I think people should not be discouraged about, it's not going to happen overnight, but each step was learning and exciting and good things came of it. So can you stop sharing? And I am going to so this was wildly exciting, and the time that went into it. I now want to turn to Jesus Sanchez, who's not on my screen, but has to be somewhere. Jesus, um, do you have, oh, there you are. Do you have
Yeah, I got it. I got it.
you got it?
I got it. We're
You
ready.
got it?
1 second. Let me just confirm that folks could see.
Yeah, we got it.
All right. So, hello, everyone. My name is Jesus Sanchez. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the co-founder and director of economic justice at Gente Organizada. Gente Organizada was the organization that incubated Pomona Kids First, which we're going to tell you about our story and our journey. So I think for me, as we're kind of just giving, reporting back to the field and just kind of letting folks know and telling this story, like I want to acknowledge our leadership, right, and give you all context and background in terms of who propelled this initially, right? So this all started for us 8 years ago. And it was an effort to push our city to increase investments in young people. And for 8 years, we were met with a ton of resistance. And the faces that you see up here, our board, Gente, has evolved since, but in the last 3-4 years, this was our leadership, these individuals. And I wanted to start the presentation with just acknowledging the folks behind the organization. And it's a youth-led intergenerational board. And this is our team who said, we're going to go ahead and do this. And our young people, our parents, our community that are represented on the board have led us to this, right? And have supported us and made sure that each step of the way we were moving forward, right? So quick acknowledgement. Also important to note that Gente, once we got to the signature gathering process and really started to circulate petitions, we were just an endorsing organization, right? And just kind of navigating the C3 limitations. We set up Pomona Kids First, which was our ballot initiative committee, and basically started to organize under a new organization, right? So those of you nonprofit folks that are looking to do that, like Angie had mentioned, just a legal support team, like that's huge. So just highlighting that and that transition. So what is Measure Y, Pomona Kids First? So to ensure Pomona's youth and their families have the same opportunities to thrive, our measure amended the city's charter to create a fund for kids and their families, and to increase funding for programming and services to address a variety of different needs. And there's different frameworks that we included within the ordinance that we wrote of which age groups we wanted to impact and how, through what goals we had and what services we wanted to really center whatever investments are going to be coming. What made Pomona Kids First unique in many ways was we went for 10% of our city's general fund, and we got it. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about those results. And we also created a new department within the city to be able to house this work. Those are some just very important points, like obviously kind of just a quick introduction to this, but I think in terms of creating a department for us, we needed the infrastructure in our city to be able to do this work correctly. This was one of these decisions structurally within the ordinance that we decided as a community that what we have now in City Hall wasn't equipped to be able to do what we wanted, right? So we had to build out. So not doing it justice, but I'm gonna kind of like take you all through 8 years of organizing. But just to kind of quick recap, like our phase one, and we're in the process of like really trying to document what we did and have that ready for us and to share. But our first phase one was 8 years of grassroots organizing. And what I mentioned in terms of just going to city council, going to elected officials, and um, having to kind of keep coming back and keep strategizing. So that took a lot of work, but it also, we laid a foundation. And I think, especially when it comes to messaging in the community, in terms of, is the city doing enough for young people? Those 8 years were key because we would hammer them, right? And we would hold them accountable. Things would happen in the community in which young people were being harmed or lack of services. We were at these meetings reminding them that, hey, we're asking for these things and you're not responsive. So that phase one, that those kind of 8 years, obviously they were not for nothing, right? Phase two of our campaign, we circulated a petition for signatures, and we had to engage roughly 25,000 residents in the city. We collected 18,000 signatures, 13,000 of which were valid, and we met our threshold and we qualified. And that was a huge step. I was hoping that was it. Like, okay, we won, right? Like that was a ton of work and really hard. And no, that was just to get on the ballot. And then the real work got started, right? Which was phase three. And appropriately, this photo, this was our field team, which so glad Margaret got to meet as well on a Saturday. And these were our folks that were knocking doors every weekend. And really just want to emphasize, like, we made it a point to get directly impacted folks to do the work. And most of these young people and some of the parents you see in the photo, a lot of these folks have been working on this campaign for multiple years. They were invested, they knew how to speak to the issues, and each one of them had a story to tell when they knocked doors. So in that process, we made roughly 20,000 phone calls, phone banking. We knocked and flyered roughly 15,000 homes in the Get Out to Vote campaign. And we also had a team of different consultants and specialists, I would say, that were supporting us with either strategy, mailers, different things that we did. So we built a really good team around us, and a lot of things Gente does. We are very like local based and Pomona centric. Even the consultants that we were able to bring on board, from our photographer to our strategist to different folks, all lived here. And that's another exciting piece, that we were able to build a team that's vested in this community, that hopefully we're not done, right? And we're able to kind of continue organizing together in an electoral space. So now phase four, which is kind of like implementation and like what's next, like what are the lessons learned through this. And we like, I guess first of all, like just we won. And we won with 62% of the vote. So that graphic needs to get updated, but that was when we declared victory and felt kind of comfortable enough to say this is happening. But we won with 62% of the vote. Our county, counted final votes yesterday, I believe. And there was a lot of lessons learned here for us, and we're still kind of going through them, right? Like I think you could never go wrong when you place kids and families on the ballot. You could never go wrong when you place participatory budgeting on a ballot, which is what we did. I think the effort, the measure, the law itself, the ordinance we wrote, but also just the field game, everything we did, we cut through a lot of the polarization we see through of our two-party system, especially right now. We cut through all of that. And we were actually able to connect with working class folks, whether they were blue or red, right? Or independent. And we're sitting with that. And as an organization that we're sitting with that right now. And my lights just went out in the room. Sorry, y'all, it's a censored light. 1 second. And I think like the other lesson for us that we've learned, like we have a blueprint now, as an organization, as a community, on how to do this work. Um, and we're also kind of just sitting with that and like, what does this look like for us moving forward? This has inspired a lot of folks in the community. For us as an organization, one of the big dreams of our org when it was first founded, by mothers who were undocumented and immigrant to this country, was for their children to be in positions of leadership in this city, to be able to drive this community where it needs to go, to not only be in positions of leadership and power, but to pass laws, to be able to allocate resources to meet our needs. We just took a huge step in doing that. And so there's a lot of momentum. I have to acknowledge, though, too, that it was a bittersweet moment for our community as well. We had this huge victory here locally, but in terms of what's happening at the state level with some huge losses at propositions and what happened at the national level, this was a bittersweet moment for us as well. So lastly, we have our hands full with implementation now. And I'll end with this just to kind of give a sense of what we were up against. We had zero support from all current elected officials. There was one of them that did not go on the record, but quietly was like, no. We were very close for a quick moment to organizing a Pomona Kids First slate of all council races and school board races, and were undercut by the establishment. They scared them off. All of those folks who were thinking about it, who were close, lost. And they all lost. And we were like, wow, what happens if you would have ran on a Kids First agenda for city council, for school board? Not only did we not have the council support, we were also going up against labor. We went up against the police union. And this was as grassroots as it gets. And we leaned into that. And when we knocked doors, we told folks that, like, hey, every elected official's against this. This is why we think you should vote it. This is who we are. And some of these conversations Margaret got to witness when we knocked a couple of doors. That's all they needed to hear. Like, oh, okay, that's got it. And so very interesting, kind of like just to kind of take that in with the presentation from Dave and some of that data to just sit with that. But yeah, that's us. And just want to say thank you to Margaret, to Heising Simons. California Community Foundation was a huge support in this too. But also a lot of, mostly just our young people and our parents who put in all this work. We got our hands full with implementation, got a lot of meetings, and kind of just got to mend fences and relationships because things were very tense for situations. And I'll stop there. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. We could all listen forever on this. And it's just hilarious that your calling card was, they're all against it, you should be for it. And the other calling card was, they're all for it, you should be for it too, which is, there are many ways to do this, and each community is different and each sponsor is different. I am so thrilled and amused, and the lessons are amazing. So I'm going to give Martine Watkins, who's on the City Council of Santa Cruz, a few minutes to tell us what happened in Santa Cruz with the soda tax. We don't call it a soda tax, it's a sugar sweetened beverage tax. But it has implications for all of us going into the future, which is why I think it's so important to talk about this. And Martine led the campaign for a Children and Youth Fund in Santa Cruz, and then it led to this amazing other accomplishment. Go, Martine.
Thanks, Margaret. Thank you so much. And first of all, congratulations to the other campaigns. It's so wonderful to hear about your success. I'm thrilled to be sharing that we too found success in Santa Cruz with our sugar sweetened beverage tax. That was Measure Z on the ballot. So I'll go through just a few of our challenges, some of the strategies we use to overcome those challenges or navigate those challenges, and then some suggestions and ideas moving forward for other communities who might be looking for doing something similar. So really quickly, what Measure Z is, Measure Z was a 2 cents per ounce distribution tax on sugary sweetened beverages. And it really was targeting sodas, essentially. We had exceptions for, diet beverages, although we know there's issues associated with those, juices, milk, all of those things. It's really the highly, highly sugary beverages that we were taxing. And what it was designed for is to be reinvested in community health and kids. And a strategy to do that was to do it as a general fund because we had, unlike other jurisdictions, major opposition in the city of Santa Cruz and knew we couldn't get to that 2/3 threshold, which we wished, of course, we could have. One thing that's different than some of the other examples is that this was council directed. There was a subcommittee of council members who were working on this. We had support from the city manager's office. We had the full unanimous support of the council, really worked to engage our community, but it was driven through really 3 council members who served as the subcommittee moving this forward. Did a lot of work in advance to try to mitigate some of the opposition, learn and really edit and kind of create something that would work in the city of Santa Cruz. So the big challenges for this type of campaign, for no surprise for those who have had the beverage industry in their communities, they come in very hard with a lot of money. And sure enough, they did the same thing in Santa Cruz. So what they spent was nearly $2 million in an opposition campaign. And I think the final report was 1.9 million in terms of what they invested in a campaign, a no campaign. And this is a town of, let's say, 65,000 or so folks. So you can imagine what that looks like. We, compare it, raised 5 cents to every dollar they spent. So sort of a David versus Goliath type of situation, as you can imagine. And when you have that amount of money, the opposition just flooded mailboxes, flooded news streams, flooded social media, and did all they could to confuse voters and to spread misinformation. So for us, it was really about building up who are trusted individuals in our community, having that broad sense of trusted names on our mailers, on our website, those endorsers, getting all of the right people, the Santa Cruz people, if you will, behind us, and really ultimately going door to door and doing our best to talk to voters directly. That's the one thing we have local power. They're flying in consultants. They're bringing people in from out of town. So our local presence was really powerful. Unlike the other example in Pomona, we had the full support of the council. We had support of many of our board of supervisors, other elected officials, school boards, et cetera. So getting those types of endorsements were really critical. Another challenge was really the public trust. I know Dave sort of brought that up. This is a general tax, and certainly people are not sure what politicians are doing with their money, right? And so there was an element of that with, hey, this is just going to get sucked up into the general fund like every other tax. However, what we designed, and this is based on a lot of the work that Margaret's done, is that oversight committee of stakeholders who will ensure the dollars are reinvested in health and into kids in the way that we were saying, and we had designed the ballot language to look like. The other challenge uniquely to this type of tax is this legal hurdle. Without getting overly complicated into the history of sugar sweetened beverages taxes, there was a state law that basically stopped jurisdictions from being able to do it. The state law had 2 elements. One was that they would penalize local jurisdictions if they did by not processing their sales tax, basically making it not worth it. That won in court. So that was we prevailed and saying that was not constitutional by the state. The other is preemption, that the state preempts every jurisdiction from being able to do it. That has not had a legal outcome. So that's still on the books. And so this legal kind of, your city's going to be set up for this major legal battle. It's going to cost so many millions of dollars to fight this. The industry's coming in hard was one of their core arguments. So really trying to explain this sort of complex legal landscape and approach was also a challenge that we had to work with. Some of our strategies, and I mentioned a few, is really just getting the support of the community and building up your endorsements and building up the trusted individuals in the community. Unlike a campaign where you are signature gathering, where you're building that coalition really early on, ours is sort of was a little bit different in that it was council oriented. We did have a coalition of support, but we needed to build that out from there. So in a relatively short period of time. Like most campaigns, there's a lot of noise, if you will, around messaging, responding to messaging. How do you how do you do your marketing approach, et cetera? We did our best to really stay our course that, we believe that this is the right thing for the city of Santa Cruz, that we will impact health, wellness, and kids, and that this is a case of Santa Cruz versus Big Soda. And so trying to really just make sure we're really clear about what we're relaying to our community members, and of course, tailoring as needed for whoever the audience is. I think the biggest thing about Santa Cruz, and like most communities, it's really about precinct walking. It's going door to door. It's talking to the voters and helping them understand what this is, what this isn't. For us, it was a lot about really just helping provide clarity in a very confusing campaign because of the flooded misinformation that they were receiving about the no on Z from the Beverage Association. The other thing too is the Beverage Association has to it's the Beverage Association funded by Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Keurig, Dr. Pepper, et cetera. And then you have everybody else who's supporting ours, which are DNTs, health centers, education folks, et cetera. So when you look at it, who's funding what, there's a lot of power in looking into that and sort of highlighting that in your messaging.
Martine, can I interrupt you for a minute? Because you basically did this for all of us. I mean, you were the pioneers, the first people after this law passed that said there could be no soda taxes. Martine went to court, won the case in court, and then as a council member got her council to put it on the ballot. They were the first people to try this, and they did it for all of us because when early on in this project, everybody wanted to do a soda tax. The state said it was illegal. No one could do it. It took Santa Cruz to do this test and actually get it to pass. So now all of a sudden, there's a future in raising money for kids through a soda tax that has a double whammy. It's healthy for kids and it raises money. So I think that's a key point here. I really wanted to say thank you. And thank you, Martine, for going to court and having the guts to stick with this.
Thanks, Margaret. Talk about, endurance is definitely a component of it, right? In my first term, we tried to bring this forward at the city of Santa Cruz. That was in 2018. And that's when the state law came in and stopped us. And now that I've finished my second term, so I'll be off the council in one meeting. We got this done. I got the council support to do it. We moved it forward, and we just got the results that we won in a way that I don't think they'll do like a whole, counting.
So I'm gonna move on to the. I'm going to call on our friend Nicole Durst and myself to sort of sum up a little bit about what we learned from all of this. But I do want to say two things. This was such a success for our measures, and there are two big reasons we could do it. One is Heising Simons gave money to these three campaigns, made a huge difference. The second thing is a court case that said you only need 60% or you only need 50% if you collect signatures. So those were two major things that made a huge difference. I have a slide I'll show you later. What I think are the other things. And the other thing about this is, man, these campaigns could not have been more different. And it is just hilarious to me. One is like, we're going to beat the system for the people. And the other was pictures of cute kids all over the highways. Everybody in the city loves it. Everybody in the county loves it. So there is not one right way to do this. So Nicole, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I just have to thank you all. This was like the most inspiring 51 minutes I may have been a part of since the election day. So thank you all so much. And just Angie and Jesus and Martine, like what amazing leadership that you all brought to your communities and these efforts. Like so impressed and so enamored by the work that you all have been able to do. So just awesome. The thing that I was thinking about is, I agree with Margaret that the campaigns were all very different, but I think what is unifying in each of these campaigns is that you all operated from such a position of confidence. Like you didn't second guess yourselves, and you really knew what it was going to take to win, and what it was going to take to win and what the message was different in all three of your communities. But like you were clear about what your message was and what your strategy was, and you did not deter from that. I think some of what can get people tripped up in these campaigns is uncertainty about what their strategy was going to be, uncertainty about who they needed to win, uncertainty about what their message was. You didn't have any of that. Like you knew, Angie, that it was going to take the big tent, and you put all your energy into creating that big tent. And Martine, you knew that it was like the people versus the soda industry. Like that was going to be the message. And Jesus, you knew that it was like we are just not doing enough for kids. And you knew exactly what your message was and what it was going to take to win. So really inspiring. The other thing is just that in all these instances, it took a long time, right? So you talked about fighting this fight for 8 years, 10 years, building the narrative, making sure that people understood like that kids were not being served and youth were not being served in the way they needed to in these communities, and having legislative fights along the way, being real leaders, in this movement, and going through the painstaking work that it takes to build the coalition and to find the right policy that you need to be able to win. And then finally, I think like just really strong leadership from your steering committees that you talked about, like really diverse leadership, across the board. And in Jesus's instance in Pomona, it was, diverse members of communities, folks that are most impacted by this, but like really invested, really at the table. He spoke about the community knowledge from the consultants and the advisors that were involved. In Angie's case, it was that really big tent, right? And, a leadership that reflected business and education and, bipartisan. And Martine's effort, like your leadership as an elected official, as a city council person who was able to bring these folks together and have that moral and actual authority to do that. So those were the things that I was struck was like clarity and confidence, like of strategy and message, of diverse leadership, and strong leadership in the three of you, that these campaigns really do take someone like each of you that can own it and live and breathe it. And then finally, just the long commitment. Those are the things that I took from this.
So, do any of the presenters have something they feel they left out that they want to add? Because I cut a lot of people off. Are there any, Christina, do you have a pressing question that came up in the chat or anything? Well, I'm going to then show the slide that I did here, which, how do I move it to the next slide? Oh, shit. Oh, I see. I mean, this is the chart that, summarizes what people told us, and we'll be sending it to you, but you can see each one was different. And as Nicole points out, they shared similar similar strengths. I thought this is a picture also from Pomona. The groundwork took many years. The signatures allowed us to pass with 50% in all the places. And the strategies were different. And there's a certain amount of luck involved. We had two very similar campaigns in the last election season, a very grassroots campaign and a campaign run for early care that were fabulous campaigns, and they both lost. So some things depend on the environment. And I love this. I love the pictures here because this is the a billboard that was done by the Sonoma people, these darling children, huge billboard. Yes, everybody's there. And this is the sign on the side of the Gente office, which is like, you're wasting money on the cops. Let's do something positive for kids. And both strategies worked. And I just love that they were quite different. So we are going to move on to the part of this meeting that is about questions, and anybody who would like to stay is welcome to stay and sort of ask question about their specific circumstances or anything that you have been inspired by that you want to learn more about. And we have 2 more minutes, so I will give our presenters any last minute thoughts. Jesus, you have a last minute word for folks?
I think there's probably a ton of stuff that I obviously left out, like not enough time to condense all of that right in 10 minutes. But we did have a coalition, but it was a very small coalition, and it was a coalition of really 3 organizations that were nonprofits. We did have organized opposition against us. But every one of those leaders associated with those organizations has like a huge footprint in the community. And when we would knock doors, this is once folks got the ballot, we would hear from folks like, hey, I saw who was supporting and who was against, and that helped me make my mind up. So just to kind of reiterate the power of a lot of like nonprofits and community organizations that are doing work and have been doing work for years. That have the trust of voters in the community too. So yeah, so big shout out to Gente Organizada that incubated it, Just Us for Youth that does a lot of youth services with At Promise young people, and the Pomona Valley Pride Center. Those are the main organizations.
I loved your argument at the door when I went with Jesus. He goes like, do you remember when we voted for a tax 2 years ago for a sales tax? And people say, yeah. And he goes like, have you seen anything happen from it? No. Well, that's why we need to set aside the money that we raised for kids. And it was using the fact that it has been a negative argument in previous campaigns. Like, didn't we just pass a sales tax? And he used that as, hey, that's an argument for a set aside.
Exactly.
It's so powerful. And I was just laughing. And I'll make one confession, which is I wasn't sure you were going to pull it off, Jesus, because it was 10%. And I thought, oh, it can't be done. And when you did it, it's.
For the record, Margaret was doing everything in her power to convince us to like, hey, consider 5%. And I actually brought it back to our folks, but this is one of those that if I were authentic, like genuinely just kind of making the decisions, and I would have done something less, but we brought it back to our community and they're like, no, we're doing 10%. Like, we don't care about thinking this is too much. Like, and people were starting to make arguments around why it should be more than 10%. Like, and there are valid arguments because this wasn't just about, and this was part of our messaging too, this wasn't just about like, hey, we're going to do arts and crafts at a community center. We're going to roll out a basketball at a basketball court. This is violence prevention. This is housing. This is like so much more than what our opposition tried to kind of portray this to be, which was like arts and crafts activities for little ones.
So the first part of this session is over. And now we're going to move into the next part of this. And I'm counting on people to have specific questions about, well, what could we do in my community? And people who've been participating in our network, in our cohort, please stay. And do people have specific questions they'd like to ask? Courtney, you got a question? No.
Actually, Margaret, there's a question in the chat, and it's from Dan Berman from First Five. Dan wanted to know, was the mechanism of the measure dependent on Pomona being a charter city? I know Ed chimed in and said generally it is, but wanted to make sure I put that out there for everyone. So, Jesus, why don't you?
Yep, correct. And that the fact that we were trying to amend our charter required we collect more signatures and extra hurdles for us. But yes.
So set-asides, we've referred to them as set-asides. We're talking about a measure that says the city is required to set aside a portion of its general fund for kids. Yeah, I mean, some people do 2%, some people do 3%. Jesus did 10, unbelievable. But you do it by amending the charter. So it has to be done in a charter city. We are fighting the good fight and hope that at some point to win the fight about being able to do it at a county level. And our attorneys, the same attorney that advised Angie, who's the most wonderful attorney in the world on this, James Harrison. So if you want to join our cohort, you have access to his brilliance. He thinks we can make an argument at the state for allowing counties to do this. But we haven't won that yet.
So Aaron is curious about how much both campaigns had to spend for signatures.
And how much they had to spend overall.
Our total budget was 620. I think signatures were up about 300, but remember we had to do it twice because the first time we had a bad firm and they turned in fraudulent signatures. So we had to start all over again. So it was that times 2.
So what was your budget, Jesus?
Total roughly 500,000 for the signature gathering, a little under 200,000. And I think just a note there is that we tried to do our best to time when we collected signatures to avoid the March primary, but also to tap into the off season for these companies to get the best price. So we had to kind of thread a needle there. That was like really nerve-wracking actually, because if we mistimed it, we would have lost.
And then Tania Thorne, correct me if I'm wrong, please don't hesitate to come off mute. Said she'd like to know how these experiences help San Diego with their future initiatives. I don't know if that was rhetorical in nature, if there was something specific you wanted, but wanted to make sure I gave voice to that.
You got it right the first time. Yeah, so, I know San Diego's working on a future initiative here, and so I'd love to see the work that, succeeded in other parts of California, and I see a lot of San Diego representation here. So I don't know if anybody can speak to that. I know I will be talking to Children's First Collective tomorrow, but if anyone else would like to chime in, happy to hear what they have to say.
Any of our San Diego people on the call? Courtney.
Hi all, and thanks Tanya for being here. Appreciate your coverage of these amazing triumphs statewide, and San Diego's confidence that we have. I think, Jesus and Angie and their collaboratives are giants now in this work, and I think San Diego's confidence is bolstered in this proof of concept. I think San Diego is deeply committed to research in the next 6 weeks to find a definitive path forward to our ballot box.
Aaron asked a question, how did Pomona and Sonoma learn from other measures? And I think they both did a lot. Jesus?
Yeah, I've been checking in with Margaret and coming to Funding the Next Generation and Children's Funding Project stuff for years. It is extremely helpful to hear all the detail, like just the example that Jesus gave around, the sort of subtleties of when you bring on your signature gathering and how that can impact the cost. Details like that, you learn so much from other campaigns. Like even the best strategist, if they're a local person, they may not be aware of kind of what other campaigns are doing. So
yeah, and I think for us, we were, I think, first kind of just motivated to even think about this because of the past campaigns, right? Like San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond. The ordinance was modeled after Richmond. And I think what really kind of gave us the push, especially for that 10%, was Measure J, which was an LA County initiative, which set aside 10% of funds for care first approaches, and really explicitly kind of just going against the carceral kind of just budgets that our county was passing. And we studied, so this is an interesting actually note, our field game was dictated by those results of that election, and we studied which precincts showed up for Measure J in past years, and that's where we decided to focus our energy. And also, we knew that Pomona voted for it, and that didn't even mention kids or youth really, like as a Measure J. But we were confident Pomona supported it, and those were two past measures. And just to acknowledge too, Monica, your comment, definitely, like I would really appreciate that, like support from folks in terms of implementation. And like I know folks in Sacramento have been doing this for a long time too. So let's connect. And we just yesterday set up a team of folks who are going to be doing our implementation campaigns.
What Jesus was talking about, the LA measure, which set aside 10% of the LA budget for community investments. And you benefited a lot from that in that they were sued. They had to go to court, and the first court case was against them. It had to be appealed because the union said it was illegal to do this. And so you benefited a lot from, having had that the legal issues resolved. And that's happened throughout this whole effort to get measures on the ballot. We've had a number of court cases that have been in our favor, and now Martina is a pioneer in getting soda taxes back as an option. So the landscape has changed.
Yeah, Margaret, Dan Berman has a question. Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks. This is about the for Councilmember Watkins, about the court win. Was there anything specific about that to it being a council-led initiative, or I guess more specifically, does that set a precedent that we could do a voter initiative at a county-wide scale to do the same thing?
For the county, it depends. If the county were a charter county, they would be eligible to do a sugar sweetened beverage. So it's only eligible for charter counties and charter cities. So our county is not a charter county. And so they, even though there was some interest by some of the board of supervisors, they're just not eligible to pursue a sugar sweetened beverage tax. And in regards, it could go either way. I think in the past, some of these taxes have been voter kind of community driven initiatives. And then in this case, it's, it was council driven. And, I guess as a recommendation, I think it's great to have conversations with both. If you can, if it's community driven, to really consult with some of the electeds to make sure you're neutralizing potential opposition to the best of your ability and able to make tweaks if needed. So I think there's benefits and there's pathways either way.
And I think the Santa Cruz situation is an example what can happen when you have a single elected official who is your champion, and then who enlists another one. That can make a huge difference, who can intimidate the rest of the people on the council.
No, and thanks for saying that, Margaret. I feel really grateful. I had two really great colleagues who were on board right away. And so they too are leaders in this work. And when you have the right council, you kind of have to seize that moment. And so when you can kind of get all of the votes, you want unanimous support, like that's sort of the timing piece, right? And so that's part of the strategy, and I feel lucky it all worked out.
And someone had to take the initiative.
Yeah, thanks.
And to get the ball rolling. So other questions, thoughts? Or people want to share what they're going to do next? I hear, the implementation in Sacramento and Pomona have a lot of similarities in that the measures were quite similar. And I think we'll both facing sort of inside government resistance, inevitable. So I think that will be an important way for people to share next steps. So other questions, comments, last words?
Margaret, why don't you talk about the state conference?
Oh, you do that, Christina.
So we're excited. We hope you'll save the date for March 5th in Sacramento. We'll be having a state conference where it's really a great opportunity to bring everyone together. We're going to get to potentially even do a deeper dive, give Jesus and Martine and Angie the mic and let them, really talk about what happened. Really having a great opportunity to bring a team. Everybody here has talked about how your coalitions really matter in getting these things off the ground and how you have to create that energy and perseverance to go the distance. And attending a day conference is a great way to set aside that time. On top of the opportunity to be energized and inspired, there'll be a little bit of training just on how to get started and what the ongoing offerings of F&G will be all through 25 and 26. And then there'll be some opportunities to connect individually and network and maybe even go out to dinner afterwards and brainstorm with your teams. So all of that to say, set aside September, know where that came from, March 5th, and there will be more information coming out so that you can register. Something that we hope to include in that initial email is an opportunity for you to kind of weigh in on what breakouts we do. We really want to make sure we're being responsive to where you're feeling you need the most help to get off the ground right now. So make sure that you reply to that as soon as you can. That will help us pattern what the rest of the agenda looks like. And if you have any questions or suggestions, don't hesitate to drop us an email.
And so we like to think of this as a movement that is being created. So every time there's a success or, it keeps building the capacity. So, hopefully every community in San Francisco in the state will, ultimately have some local funding stream for young people. So, part of what we're doing in Sacramento is bringing people together to create that kind of energy and momentum and join forces for getting other statewide organizations and other communities knowledgeable about this. So it's amazing to me how few people actually think about using the ballot, thinking about we have to keep talking about it so people realize